Hey there everyone, I am Jeff. This is Tabletop Toolbox and you are watching the third episode of the Weekly Ratchet. In this episode, we're going to talk about board game expansions. We're going to talk about some crowdfunding and we're going to talk about expanding crowdfunding. You know what, it'll make sense when we get to it here on the Weekly Ratchet. Hello everyone, I hope you have had a fantastic week. It is a bit late here in the evening in Ashland, Virginia. It has been a very long week. I apologize, this video is going out a little later than I had planned. In fact, you know what, just give me a little second here, because this is the kind of day that I have had. And in case you're wondering, this is a Stone Delicious Citrus IPA. Yeah, it's been a week. My family and I have been working on a review. Actually, we spent most of the weekend filming a review for the Dice Tower of Malem Space Agency. This is by Rebel Studio, and the designer is he's a doctor, I think, Reiner Knizia. Yeah, this is a lightweight family game. It's a push your luck game. You're trying to get up these tracks and sort of deploy your castronauts, I'm not really sure, to moons and planets. Very, very lightweight. My daughter absolutely loves it. And it's going to be a very fun review. We got all of our cats involved in this one, so keep an eye out for that. A couple of new games. Actually, not very many new games. I have some new expansions. Here's the first one. This is the Distilled Cask Strength mini expansion. So this is just a deck of cards, as you can probably tell, and it adds what looks to me to be a bit more chaos to the distilled formula, if you will. I did a review of this recently out on the Dice Tower as kind of part of a 4-in-1 video. I talked about how the market of distilled is the one aspect of the game that I struggle with the most. I really just don't like the way the market works. I was hoping to see if this would fix some things, and it looks like it's going to do some things with the market that could help, but also could hinder. So I don't know. I've read through the cards. I've kind of seen what it does. I haven't gotten to play it though. I can't say that I'm super eager to try this, but I'm still trying to explore what Distilled really has to offer. I just don't love it. I don't think this will fix it, but I do still enjoy the idea of the game. I just don't like playing it. So anyways, that is the Distilled Cask Strength expansion. This is Evergreen, Pines, and Cacti. This is an expansion to Evergreen. Evergreen is by Halmer Hawk. Halmer also designed Photosynthesis. Evergreen is a much more Euro experience than Photosynthesis. I really do enjoy the game. We have actually played a little bit of it lately with this expansion having coming in, so we're going to talk about this again in just a moment. The last one I'm going to talk about here real quick, another temporary addition here to the library, is Wormwood. This is, you know what, I'm just going to show you here the GameWorks Studio Zion or Ixion. I'm not really sure. It's not even mentioned out on Board Game Geek. This is a almost 100% card game. You are representing various civilizations in what they call a far future post-apocalyptic setting. You are trying to recover echoes, which are remnants of an arc which brought the early civilizations to this current planet, if you will, and trying to recover those echoes. The first to get to 10 wins the game. There is a very interesting, I don't know if I want to call it jousting or even a tower defense. Not tower defense isn't the right word, but there's this idea of armies kind of passing by each other and attacking each, unit as they pass. Looks kind of neat. We're going to play that hopefully tomorrow. And I should mention, actually, I'm already off my game here a little bit. This is a Kickstarter prototype. This was sent to me by the designer and one of his friends, or someone who's working on the project. And so I'm going to be doing a preview of this here on the channel for the Kickstarter campaign. Keep an eye out for that. So yeah, that's Wormwood. Those are the games that are new here this week. What have you picked up lately? Okay, that's an interesting beer. I've had Stone Delicious before, but never the Citrus Delicious. Stone actually has a brewery here in the Richmond area, kind of over on the east side of town. Been there just maybe twice. It's a little off of our beaten path, but I've also been to one of their locations out in San Diego. I did not get to their main brewery. But, yeah, I'm definitely a fan of Stone. All right, hey, let's talk about some crowdfunding campaigns. I don't have very much here to run through, but I have mentioned this already in the past. The Eve War for New Eden campaign ended today, and we're going to talk about this here in a moment, so I'm actually going to just kind of gloss over it for now. Also, Tokyo Highway Expansion. I think I mentioned this one last week. I did go ahead and throw a pledge in on this one just for the expansion. It just looks really cute, and I think my daughter would have a lot of fun with it. Also, last week, shortly after I filmed the second episode of the Weekly Ratchet, the Philharmonics game came out by Arcona, and I did throw a pledge in on that one. I'm guessing at this point I'm not going to see a preview copy of it, which is a bummer, but I'm just, this game is so far up my alley as far as theme and such goes that it was just a no-brainer. Also, Ostia Pirates. Now, I mentioned Ostia in two places. It made my top 10 games of 2023 out on the Dice Tower, and I also believe I mentioned it in my top 10 anticipated games for this year. Ostia was a lot of fun to play, and I really thought it was going to be just a very, very challenging experience. I ended up clicking with it pretty well and having a lot of fun playing this at the Dice Tower Retreat last year, so I am really, really looking forward to Ostia. I don't think it'll land this year, but who knows? Uki Bakoya is the publisher for this one, and they have a really good track record. So yeah, that's Ostia Pirates. I did take a look at Knee Deep in Hexes. This is it's a pretty big crowdfunding project, pretty big campaign. The designer of this is Marcel Kratz, I'm guessing on that pronunciation. It's a two-player, sort of a turn-based skirmish game, kind of like your Command and Conquer and such, but obviously turn-based. What really caught my attention with this one is that this game is on Kickstarter right now, and it has a 9.0 rating on Board Game Geek. We call that suspect in the business. I'm not a big fan of, I love RTS video games. Love them. I love them on the computer. It's not really a genre that I think I want to get into too much on the tabletop experience. I don't know. I feel like that turn-based element of it would just really kill the experience for me. And that's just me. I know they're very popular games. Also, I have been looking at Photo Tour. This is, I didn't put the publisher or the designer's name on here. Actually, that's because I couldn't pronounce any of them and I didn't even want to try. But this is a contract fulfillment card-playing game. It looks very similar to Earth. But what I find interesting is that it is obviously set in North America. But everything about the publisher and designer says either Japanese to me. I'm not really sure. It looked unusual. But those are the ones that I am checking out. What crowdfunding games are you checking out lately? What are you interested in finding out more about? Okay, question of the week, folks. So last week we were talking about scoring games on Board Game Geek. And I was talking about the fact how some people use the scoring system on Board Game Geek as sort of a wish list. Oh, these are the games I'm really interested in, versus, of course, just rating a game based on how you think it is, implying that you have played it. So let's go through some of the comments I got. My friend Matt Ball said, I try to rate games based on the BGG rating guide. And if you're wondering what the BGG ratings are, they range from a 1, which is awful, defies game description, up to a 10, which is outstanding, will always enjoy playing. And I think that really kind of doubles down on this idea that you are rating these games based on your own experience playing them, not just because of what you think it might be worth or because of what you've heard or maybe what you think about the publisher or designer. These are games that you would conceivably be familiar playing and are rating it based on your experience with that game. And along those lines, CR Poll asked if BGG audits the scores at all and suggested that you should have to have a number of recorded plays before you can review it. And I'm going to tell you something. I thought this was a really interesting idea, and it's not something that we haven't seen before. In fact, Amazon requires you now to have purchased a product through Amazon before you can review it on the platform. And it wasn't always that way. Back in the late 2000s, like 2008, 9, 10, I was reviewing a lot of video games out on Amazon. Of course, I wasn't buying them from Amazon, but I was able to go and review them there. Now you can't do that. You can't review a product unless you bought it through Amazon. Of course, there is still rampant cheating for reviews out on Amazon. I've heard of companies, actually it was Dan Hughes from the Sporadically Bored podcast was talking about these companies that will basically, you go and buy the product, you give it a 5-star review, and then the company will reimburse you plus a little extra for that positive review. Of course, you've probably bought and reviewed a complete piece of junk, but you get it for free, right? And it's a pretty big sort of side hustle, if you will, in the Amazon, universe, I guess. Anyways, but I think it's kind of an interesting notion, right? That you have to have sort of at least revealed to Board Game Geek, suggesting at least that you have played the game a number of times before you can actually review it. I don't see that going over very well with the BGG community, but I'm also not saying I'm against it. So that was a pretty interesting comment there. Lastly, my good friend and local RVA board gamer Chris Mutton provided some of his ranges for scores that he might give a game. And I think Chris kind of, by doing that, he sort of shed light on what I think is a whole problem with scoring in the first place, right? Is that what I say is a 10 may not be what you think is a 10, but even what I say is a 7 may not be how you interpret the idea of a 7. And I'm going to say this, being a very, very small reviewer in the overall, board gaming hobby, I don't like giving scores. I really don't. I don't think that a score does that much. I'm actually a BJCP certified beer judge, and I went through a ton of training to learn how to be a beer judge. I spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars, which of course in the board gaming hobby ain't really that much, but in beer, gets you some suds, But I bought tons of different beers. I would score them. I would compare scores to notes that I could find online from the beer judging certification program. That's the BJCP. And in doing so, I learned how to judge beers. But the BJCP has rigorous guidelines for what each of the categories of a beer, the color, the aroma, the flavors, the overall impression of a beer. There are strict instructions on what the 15 points for a certain category means and how you should score it. There's nothing like that for a board game. And the BGG system or my system or Chris's system doesn't have any correlation between any of them. There's no guidance on what that means. How do we rank the art of a game? How do we rank how well it explores its mechanisms? How do we give it extra credit for being unique? Or does it get good scores because it relies on well-established systems? And all of this makes it such an arbitrary notion that, I just like to tell you how the game plays. I like to tell you how I think about playing the game, how I feel when I've played the game, and then I let you make your decisions based on that. If all I do is give you a number and I say, it's a 9, and you go and you buy it, and then you don't like it, what good have we really done each other? So if I feel like if I tell you about the game, here's how it feels to play it, here's a basic idea of the rules, here's the systems that it does, maybe it does this differently than other games, maybe it's a very common collection of mechanisms and systems in the game, and you can go, I hate deck building, and that's obviously a big deck building game, so I'm just not going to buy it even though Jeff gave it a 9 or a 10 or whatever. But that works, right? You were able to make a decision regardless of my score. It didn't matter. That's the wrong word. It's regardless of my score. I caught myself. Oh well, I'm going to blame it on our little friend here. Anyways, so those are my thoughts on scoring board games. All right, next question of the week. I was talking briefly earlier here in the show about Eve, War for New Eden. This is by Titan Forge. It is based on a video game. I think I mentioned this again last week. And what I'm going to get at here is that the campaign for this game got very expensive. You can range anywhere from about maybe $150 up to well over $500 US, and that's converting from, I don't even know what nationality of the game is created. It's obviously in a foreign currency, but I have been doing a lot of digging into this game to try and find out if I really wanted to part with that much of my money on a game that is by a publisher who has no other real highly, well reviewed, well scored games in its history. The game has no clear designer. It's kind of being designed by this company broadly, if you will. The designer is actually listed as Titan Forge Games as well as the publisher, and they don't have any other games in their history that have really reached a cult status, right? None of their previous games are very popular or very highly regarded. Now, I know they're working with a company called, I believe it's CCP, which is the designer of EVE Online. They are the creators, owners, maintainers of EVE Online. And so that right there was, is obviously a good sign. And so anyways, I've dug into how to play videos. I've dug into all kinds of reviews. I even sat last week and I read the rulebook for this game, trying to find a reason to not back it, right? To cancel my pledge and walk away from this about $350 experience. Now, I failed. I couldn't find the more and more I looked into it, the more and more I liked what I saw. I saw a lot of cards and sort of like systems and mechanisms. I had to keep using those same terms that are clearly inspired by the video game. In fact, there was a card that the one reviewer played, and it was called the Care Bear card. And Care Bear is a term used in the video game for players who don't get into combat. Sidebar, I was a Care Bear when I played EVE Online. But just seeing that included in the game, I just thought was so cool. Here's the question. Besides finances, is there anything that has made you just cancel a Kickstarter pledge? Has there ever been a game that you've just, for any reason except for cost, you've said, nope, never mind, I'm out, I don't want anything to do with this? Listen, I certainly understand that there are financial things come up. I've had to cancel a number of pledges when I was building our cabin. In the past, when I've had to move, I was in between jobs, I've had to cancel pledges. That makes perfect sense. But I'm wondering what else besides finances have ever made you walk away from a crowdfunded campaign? Maybe some bad impressions of the designer, a bad experience with the publisher, so on and so forth. Let me know in the comments. All right, let me wrap up the show here with some recently played games. First of all, let me slide Wormwood out of the way. I did finally get to check out Clank in Space. This is by Direwolf and Renegade Games. And I gotta tell you, I've only ever played the base Clank one time. I did really have a good experience with it, but we were really pretty underwhelmed with the in-space variant of this game. Now, for me personally, when I played base Clank, I went for a strategy, as I often do in deck builders, quite frankly, that let me draw a lot of extra cards. And in fact, I think 2 out of the last 4 turns in that first game, I had my entire deck on the table, just revealed everything, was zipping all over the castle or wherever the setting is of that game, just kicking butt and taking treasures and all kinds of stuff, and zipped out long before my opponent and just clobbered them in that game. Had a lot of fun. This game was a lot harder to do that. I had a couple cards that let me draw more cards, but I did not get nearly that same engine in place, and I tried. And also we definitely got whooped up a lot more by the main bad guy, and I can't remember any of the names of the characters in the game. And I don't know. Now, I'll say this. The ending of the game was really, really funny. I was playing with my friend Daniel. I've mentioned him a couple times here on the channel. I managed to get out before he did, but I knew he had some extra points. He had a much more valuable artifact than I did, because I literally swiped him from right out in front of his face, hopped on a telepad, and whooshed all the way back to the entrance of the ship. And so he had to do some running to catch up to me. I got off the ship, and if you know the game, is kind of these escape pods, and if you get into the last room and die, you can still leave and you can still get a score. And he managed to get to that last room, but he didn't make it to an escape pod because I knew he was going to make it out on his next turn. And so what I did was I intentionally bought some cards from the market to try and see if I could get the bad guy to attack. And I did, and he did, and Daniel died. And it was, I felt bad that it actually worked, but it was also really funny that it actually worked. And so it was a pretty, exciting ending. I did win by just a few points. If he had escaped, he would have won. But I don't know. It didn't really click with us. It wasn't as much fun as my experience with the first game. Now, I'm curious about some of the expansions. If you know about any of the Clank in Space expansions, let me know in the comments if there's 1 or 2 in particular that I should really look for. They seem like they're fairly easy to get your hands on, but I don't know anything about them, and I don't really want to go spending a whole bunch of money on this without kind of having some good confidence that I could actually make it a more immersive experience. Anyways, too much talking about Clank in Space. A little zoomy in the air here, pardon me. All right, the next game that we played the same night was the Star Wars deck building game. We kind of had ourselves a deck building Thursday last week. And I'm not a big Star Wars fan. I think I've mentioned that already. I'm much more of a Star Trek fan. I just never really grew up in that Star Wars universe. My parents did not care about it at all. I've seen the first 6 movies. I think I slept through a good bit of the first 3, whatever. The deck building game, I liked a lot of the stuff that it does. I've played Star Realms many times. I saw a lot of that Star Realms pedigree in the Star Wars deck building game. I really liked being able to attack cards while they're still in the market, so you can deny your opponent the opportunity to get those cards. I also did kind of like this idea of having a base that kind of gives you some unique abilities while it is in play, and then that idea of, hey, when a base gets taken out, you're kind of immune for the rest of that turn. So if a player does get just an insane amount of damage to deal on you, they can only deal so much, and then they just kind of have to wait until the next turn. That being said, I played as the dark side, the Empire. I played as the Empire, and I just didn't have a great play of it. I did get Darth Vader. It was really one of the only unique or really valuable cards that I was able to get my hands on of my own faction. Daniel, on the other hand, had Han Solo. He had Luke Skywalker. He had at least one turn where you got both of them in play at the same time. Drew like 6 cards and just nuked the Death Star. And when we were done, and I mean, I got clobbered in this game, we were going through the deck, and all of my unique and valuable cards were at the bottom of the deck. I was never going to get to them. And that was, I don't know, it was kind of disappointing. You know, in a 2-player game, when you obviously have strong cards and weak cards, if they're just the way that they shuffle, you can just kind of get shut out of a game, and that's how I felt coming out of Star Wars. I would love to see this with maybe a theme that I can immerse myself into a little bit more, but I still think that idea would be a problem. So I don't know. I didn't have a great time with Star Wars, the deck building game. Lastly, 2 more to talk about. I mentioned the Evergreen Pines and Cacti expansion. We played this twice now. My wife and I played it the first time. I did win. The second time, she won by just 2 points. That was a very tight second match. Unfortunately, the expansion doesn't really add anything additionally to the game. So in order to introduce either of the 2 modules of this expansion, Pines or Cacti, you have to remove one of the powers of the base game. There's 6 powers in the base game. They're on the bottom right of each card. And I'm not going to go into the rules of this, but you know, you're building up these different environments on a planet. And so you have to remove one of those kind of built-in powers to then add one of these. And the first time we did pine trees, and I got just a couple, and I won that game. The second time we did cacti, I never got a single cacti. I kind of just avoided them. By the time that I had a chance to get them, it was kind of too late to add that, because the powers kind of grow as you play throughout the game. So if you wait until the end of the game to trigger one of the powers for the first time, it's not going to help you as much as triggering another power that you've already been sort of building up throughout the game. And so I just I avoided it because it didn't make sense at that time to then explore that mechanism of the game. So anyways, I love Evergreen. I think it's a very, very good game, but I don't really think that this adds enough to it to really warrant a purchase. So unless you're really just striving for more out of that system, you could probably pass on this one. The last game I'm going to talk about, which I didn't bring over because it's a huge box, I didn't feel like carrying it over from the house. This is Ticket to Ride Legacy. So I picked this up from my daughter for Christmas. We just finished, I believe, our 7th game. And I got to tell you, Ticket to Ride Legacy is the most fiddly Legacy game that I have ever played. It took us over 2 hours to play this game. There was not a lot of AP. You know, we all kind of pretty much knew what we wanted to do. But and I'm not going to give any spoilers here, but listen, it's a Legacy game. So obviously Legacy games use things like stickers and things to kind of modify the game as you go. And I feel like we have to do so much stickering in this game. We have to constantly modify these components. We are constantly evolving the board. And while on the surface, that's really cool, right? Every time you play it, it is a little different. But getting it there is such a tedious process. I was getting so frustrated every time. I was like, okay, you done? Oh, no, wait, okay, you gotta put out stickers. Are you done now? Oh, no, wait, now we gotta flip another card and go through this thing. I'm kind of looking forward to this one being done, and I'm kind of hoping that when we do get done with it, I do know that you can continue to play with what you will now have, a very unique copy of Ticket to Ride, and I'm hoping that that fiddle factor will be done, right? We'll have modified the board, it'll be set up the way that it is, and we can just sit and play it, and it won't be quite as cumbersome to get through. I don't really have high hopes, but we will see. I will definitely get through it because my daughter's having a great time of it. She clobbered us in this last game. She put some stuff together, and she got a ton of points, certainly at her dad's expense. She just made a crucial play towards the end of the game that shut down everything I'd been working on for the whole game. I came in a distant third in a 3-player game. So anyways, that was Ticket to Ride Legacy, and that is the list here on the Weekly Ratchet. Thank you very much for tuning in. I apologize for this one being late. I apologize for being tired. I'm hoping this is going to sound and look and be okay. But hey, thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you again next time very soon. I'm going to shut up and go. Take care, folks. Cheers.